Hi, welcome to 401k TV, and I'm here at the universities at Shady Grove. We just completed a TPSU program with our adjunct lecturer, Joe DeNoyior, and welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Fred.
We wanted to ask him a few questions, the president of NAPA, while we had him here. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. Well, I'm Joe DeNoyior with Washington Financial Group, and I run WFG Retirement, which is located right outside of D.C. And we specialize in working with plans and plan sponsors in really helping them engage their participants or get their participants engaged in the retirement plan in order to make a positive impact on their lives, while letting the plan sponsor or the companies really focus on what's important to them and their organization.
Great. Well, like we do at a lot of TPSU programs, the questions of fee, revenue sharing and fees and all of that came up, and rather we don't have the time to go through all of that. That's a class in and of itself, as we found out. But how should plan sponsors go about sort of dissecting and just give us the basics on that?
Okay, so sure, there are some very basic, we'll kind of go into the best practices, but there's some really basic tools that plan sponsors have available to them to at least start the understanding and or the conversation on, as a fiduciary, what should I know about fees? And really it boils down to the importance of, one, understanding what the fees are, then judging are they reasonable for the services provided, and then who's paying those fees. Those are kind of the basic questions. So the tools available to companies who have retirement plans would be, one, the basic is what's called the 408B2 fee disclosure, which the 408B2 allows them to take a look at the total fees paid, who's paying them, and where they're actually going, who's getting paid. Not as easy for each vendor. Some record keepers are a little bit more streamlined or easier to understand, but it is the starting point to understand the basic of the fees. And then to take it to the next level, once I have an understanding of what fees we're actually paying, then we feel it's very important to take it to the marketplace and actually use a third party to benchmark those fees for reasonableness.
Right.
And again, we don't say that the cheapest is the best. The Department of Labor doesn't say the cheapest is the best. It's as long as they're reasonable for services provided. So depending on what vendors you work with and so forth, some may be a little bit higher if I'm comparing one versus the other, but we really lean on a vendor for participant engagement. It's probably better for them to cover those fees that really allow the vendor to stress participant engagement.
One thing that we're hearing about is what's called fee equalization. So embedded in the fees is, you could divide it not equally, but there's the fee to manage the money.
Yes.
Then there's the administrative fees and the fees to pay advisors like yourself. So each fund is a little bit different with their what's called revenue sharing,
yes.
right? So that means that one participant who's choosing a certain number of types of fee funds is going to pay more fees than another. So what kind of things are you hearing about, and how can plan sponsors deal with that?
Sure. So to step back on the revenue share, I think one real important thing for plan sponsors to know first is how much the revenue share is and where is it going.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important in these times to make sure some of the consultants that you hire, one, you understand their costs. So from a record keeper standpoint, you know what they're actually charging. And then from an advisory standpoint, that you understand what role they're playing and if they're fee levelization or not, meaning they're not getting paid unlevel compensation or compensation for recommending one fund over the other. So let's assume that's all. We're comfortable with that. What we're hearing in the marketplace is you have some investors where passive investments make the most sense, and they actually manage their accounts, and they have a couple index funds within it that have very low or limited revenue sharing. And then for majority participants, they may be better off in a managed account or a managed solution like a target date that may have much higher revenue sharing going back to the plan. And the trend is, does it make sense for some to have a better deal than others? Or put another way, does it make sense for me, who likes to have a one-stop shop, subsidizing the other folks that like to be an index investor, in my example? So the trend is, at this point, is to really take a look at the overall fees as one, and get back to what we call a levelized fee, where all the fees that are being paid through revenue share go back into a bucket, and then everybody is charged an equal amount to manage their 401k plan above and over and above the management fee of that mutual fund. So to give you an example, Fred, if I was in an index fund that had a revenue sharing of 0.20, my 0.20 go in the bucket. You have an index fund that has no revenue share or zero, but the plan costs 0.20 to run. I would actually pay nothing, if you will, for the management because I already have a 0.20 fee, and you'd be charged the 0.20 to levelize the fee as one example. But really, it comes down to full fee transparency and understanding who's paying for what, and making it as equal or as fair as possible.
And one of the things that you said is if something doesn't feel right in the plan, it probably isn't. And I think for plan sponsors, if you don't understand it, you've got to keep asking the questions and make sure, because it is common sense, and you need advisors like yourself to decode all the language and all of the different share classes.
Yeah, well, I think it's not only your right as a client, but it's your responsibility as a fiduciary to understand, particularly understand the fees and make sure they're reasonable, but really to understand who's getting paid what and who's paying what. So ask the question until you understand and have somebody walk you through your fee disclosure. And then, like I mentioned earlier, go through a benchmarking, a third-party benchmarking. And that includes benchmarking your advisors and consultants. I mean, it's tough for me to benchmark myself, so therefore we do need a third-party benchmarking service. But that is a responsibility or a fiduciary duty.
Because it's probably true, if you as the plan sponsor don't understand, your participants are not likely to understand.
No way. Probably not. They don't have access to the same information.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Fred.